When Sierra Lane drifts off on a stranger's shoulder during a turbulent flight home, she wakes to discover he's not just charming, he's a billionaire with a heart and a past that could threaten them both. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Sierra Lane rubbed her tired eyes as she waited in line to board her final flight. After a week-long vacation in San Francisco, her first solo trip in years, she was exhausted. 2 flight delays and a bumpy ride from Denver to Chicago had left her drained. All she wanted now was to get home to Boston, back to her small apartment and the comfort of her familiar routine. Now boarding passengers in zones 3 and 4, the gate agent announced. Sierra checked her boarding pass. Zone 3, seat 14A. She gathered her carry-on bag and the book she'd been trying to finish for days. As a children's librarian, she rarely had time to read adult fiction, and this vacation had been her chance to indulge. The line moved slowly, and by the time Sierra reached her window seat, her eyelids were heavy. She tucked her bag under the seat and settled in, hoping no one would take the middle spot. No such luck. A tall, broad-shouldered man approached and gestured to the seat beside her. "Excuse me?" he said, his voice deep but gentle. Sierra shifted to make room, barely glancing up as he settled into seat 14B. She noticed his expensive-looking suit and the subtle scent of his cologne, but was too tired to pay much attention. As the plane taxied to the runway, Sierra tried to focus on her book, but the words blurred. The flight attendant announced a 90-minute journey to Boston. Sierra sighed with relief. Just 90 more minutes. The plane took off, and the steady hum of the engines created a soothing backdrop. Before she knew it, her head was nodding, her book slipping from her fingers. She fought to stay awake but lost the battle as her eyes fluttered closed. In her sleepy haze, Sierra shifted, seeking comfort. Without realizing it, she leaned to her right, her head coming to rest on the stranger's shoulder. Damian Wolfe was in the middle of reviewing notes for tomorrow's board meeting when he felt the gentle weight on his shoulder. He froze, surprised by the unexpected contact. His first instinct was to shift away. He valued his personal space, especially after spending the day surrounded by people wanting his time, his money, or his influence. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the peaceful expression on the woman's face, or maybe it was the simple fact that she had no idea who he was. Whatever the reason, Damian remained still, careful not to disturb her. It had been a long day. The tech conference in Chicago had been successful but draining. Everyone wanted a piece of the billionaire founder of edutech innovations. Investors sought meetings, competitors watched his every move, and journalists angled for quotes. His face had been plastered across the business section of every major newspaper since his company went public 5 years ago. But here, in seat 14B, he was just another passenger to the sleeping woman beside him. The thought was oddly comforting. Damian tried to return to his notes but found himself distracted. The woman's book had fallen open on her lap. It was a well-worn copy of The Silent Patient. He smiled, remembering reading it himself last year during a rare moment of downtime. For the next hour, Damian sat perfectly still. He declined the flight attendant's offer of drinks with a whisper and a slight shake of his head. He was used to controlling every aspect of his environment, yet here he was, accommodating a complete stranger, and strangely he didn't mind. The peacefulness of the moment struck him. When was the last time he'd experienced such a simple human connection? No agenda, no expectations, no carefully crafted conversation, just the trusting weight of someone unaware of his wealth, his status, or his power. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into Boston. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. The announcement startled Sierra awake. She blinked in confusion, then realized with horror that she was leaning against the stranger beside her. She jerked upright, her cheeks flushing. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she stammered, mortified. "I didn't mean to, I was just so tired and I—" Damian turned to her, a genuine smile warming his face. "Please, don't apologize. Best flight I've ever had." Sierra stared at him, taken aback by his response. She'd expected annoyance, not warmth. For the first time, she really looked at him. his dark hair peppered with grey at the temples, kind hazel eyes, and a smile that seemed to reach those eyes. He wasn't conventionally handsome in a movie star way, but there was something striking about him. That's very nice of you, but still, I basically used you as a pillow for the entire flight. Honestly, it was refreshing to sit next to someone who wasn't trying to pitch me a business idea or ask for investment advice. Sierra smiled uncertainly. Well, I'm not even sure what I'd pitch. The exciting world of children's library programming. Maybe? You're a librarian? His interest seemed genuine. Children's librarian, yes, at a small branch in Somerville. She tucked a strand of brown hair behind her ear, suddenly self-conscious. Nothing fancy, but I love it. The plane touched down with a slight bump, and the cabin filled with the sounds of seatbelts unfastening and overhead compartments opening. I should get my things, Sierra said, gathering her book and tucking it into her bag. Of course. As the plane taxied to the gate, Sierra felt an unexpected twinge of regret. In another life, in another scenario, she might have asked for his name or even his number, but the moment had passed, and soon they'd go their separate ways. When the seatbelt sign turned off, Sierra stood quickly, eager to escape the embarrassment of her impromptu nap. Well, thanks for being such a good sport, and sorry again about the, No apology needed. Safe travels. Sierra nodded and joined the line of passengers filing out. She didn't look back as she made her way through the terminal to baggage claim, already mentally preparing for the week ahead. Monday morning story time. The new display for Poetry Month. The fundraising committee meeting. It wasn't until she reached baggage claim that she realized she hadn't seen the man from 14B again. The crowded terminal had swallowed him up. Sierra felt a fleeting sadness at the missed connection, but quickly dismissed it. Men in expensive suits with kind eyes weren't exactly in the market for sleep-deprived librarians who used strangers as pillows. Sierra waited at the carousel for her small suitcase, fishing her book out of her bag to pass the time. As she opened it, something fell out. A neatly folded napkin with the airline's logo in the corner. Curious, she unfolded it. Written in clear, careful script was a message. To the woman in 14A. Thank you for the most peaceful 90 minutes I've had in years. If you'd consider coffee, dinner, or even another nap, I'd be honored. Yours, Damian. P.S. I left my card inside the book. Sierra's heart skipped. She flipped through the pages and found a business card tucked between pages 143 and 144. The card was simple but elegant. Damian Wolf, founder and CEO, EduTech Innovations, with a phone number beneath. Sierra stared at the card, then at the napkin, then back at the card. The carousel buzzer sounded, jolting her back to reality. She quickly tucked both items back into her book and moved to retrieve her suitcase. On the cab ride home, Sierra couldn't stop thinking about the napkin and the card. The man, Damian, hadn't seemed like the type to leave notes for sleeping strangers. But then again, what did she know about him beyond their brief interaction? When she arrived at her apartment, Sierra dropped her bags by the door and immediately went to her laptop. She typed Damian Wolf EduTech into the search bar and waited. The screen filled with results. Images of the man from the plane appeared alongside headlines. Tech visionary revolutionizes education. Wolf's EduTech valued at $3.7 billion. The reclusive billionaire behind America's digital classroom revolution. Sierra sank onto her couch, stunned. She had slept on the shoulder of one of the richest men in the country. A man who had built an empire from scratch, whose educational software was used in schools nationwide, who rarely gave interviews, but was photographed at charity galas with models and actresses. Sierra looked down at the business card in her hand, then at the napkin with its simple, sincere message. This couldn't be real. Men like Damian Wolf didn't write notes on napkins to ordinary women like her. They didn't notice librarians from small branches in Somerville. And yet, Sierra remembered the way he'd smiled, the genuine warmth in his eyes when he'd said it. Was the best flight he'd ever had. There had been something so real about that moment, so unguarded. She set the card and napkin on her coffee table and stared at them. Should she call? Would he even remember her by tomorrow? Maybe this was just something he did. A game for a bored billionaire. Sierra decided to sleep on it. After unpacking and taking a long shower, she climbed into bed, telling herself that in the morning, the whole thing would seem like a strange dream. But as she drifted off to sleep, Sierra couldn't help but wonder what would happen if she did call. What would a man like Damian Wolf want with a woman like her? And, more importantly, what would she say to him if they actually met again? Morning came and Sierra went back to her routine. She returned to the library, greeted her co-workers, and launched into Monday morning story time with her usual enthusiasm. The children giggled as she put on different voices for each character, and for a few hours she forgot about the napkin and the business card. But when she returned home that evening, they were still there on her coffee table waiting for her. Decision. Sierra picked up the card, running her finger over the embossed letters of Damian's name. Before she could talk herself out of it, she reached for her phone and dialed the number. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Damian Wolf speaking. Sierra's breath caught. Hi, this is Sierra. Sierra Lane, from seat 14A. On the plane yesterday, I found your note and, well, I'm calling. There was a moment of silence and Sierra's heart sank. He'd forgotten already. Or worse, someone else had answered his phone and Sierra. The way he said her name made her stomach flutter. I'm really glad you called. Sierra smiled, twisting the cord of her landline around her finger like a teenager. Really? I wasn't sure if you were serious about the coffee or dinner, or what was the other option? Another nap, Damian chuckled, though I'd be happy to start with coffee. Coffee sounds good, Sierra said, surprised by her own boldness. But I should warn you, I'm not exactly in your usual social circle. I spend my days surrounded by picture books and sticky fingerprints. That sounds far more interesting than the people I usually meet, Damian replied. How about tomorrow? There's a little cafe near your library, the Book Nook. Would 4 o'clock work? Sierra hesitated. How did he know which library she worked at? As if reading her thoughts, Damian quickly added, I hope it's not too forward. But I looked up the libraries in Somerville. There aren't many, and I thought it might be more convenient for you if we met nearby. But we can meet anywhere you'd prefer. No. The Book Nook is perfect. I go there all the time. 4 o'clock works. Great. I'll see you tomorrow, Sierra, from seat 14A. As she hung up, Sierra couldn't believe what had just happened. She had a coffee date with Damian Wolf, billionaire tech mogul and apparently writer of napkin notes. What would they even talk about? What would she wear? Sierra laughed at herself. Here she was, a 39-year-old woman, fretting like it was her first date. Maybe it was crazy to meet him, maybe nothing would come of it. But for the first time in years, she felt a spark of something exciting, something unexpected. And sometimes the best stories began with someone falling asleep in exactly the right place, at exactly the right time. Sierra arrived at the Book Nook, 15 minutes early, nervously smoothing down her simple navy blue dress. She'd changed outfits 3 times before settling on something that felt like her, comfortable but put together. After claiming a quiet table in the corner, she ordered a cup of chamomile tea and tried to calm her jittery nerves. What was she doing here? Meeting a billionaire for coffee? It seemed like something out of a movie, not her real life. Sierra had spent the morning Googling Damian Wolf, learning what the public knew about him. He'd started edutech innovations in his garage 12 years ago, developing software that made learning more engaging for children with different learning styles. The company had grown exponentially, and now Damian's educational programs were in schools across the country. Despite his success, he rarely appeared in the society pages and gave few interviews. The articles described him as intensely private and devoted to his work. The bell above the cafe door jingled, pulling Sierra from her thoughts. Damian walked in wearing dark jeans and a simple blue button-down shirt, far more casual than his plain attire. He spotted her immediately and smiled, making his way to her table. Sierra, he said warmly, thank you for meeting me. Thanks for the invitation, she replied, trying to sound calmer than she felt. Though I'm still not sure why you'd want to have coffee with someone who used you as a pillow without permission. Damian laughed as he sat down. Maybe because in a world where everyone wants something from me, you just wanted a comfortable place to rest. He paused, his expression softening. Do you know how rare that is? Before Sierra could respond, a waitress appeared to take Damian's order, just black coffee. When she left, an awkward silence fell between them. "So," Sierra said finally, "I have to ask, do you often leave notes for strangers you meet on planes?" "Never," Damian answered without hesitation. "This is definitely a first for me." "Then why me?" Damian considered her question. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. There was just something about those 90 minutes that felt real. No pretense, no agenda." He shrugged. "I didn't want it to end without at least trying to see you again." Sierra studied him, looking for any sign that he was feeding her a line. But his eyes held the same genuine warmth she'd noticed on the plane. "I looked you up," she admitted. "You're kind of a big deal. And does that bother you?" "It makes me wonder what we could possibly have in common," Sierra said honestly. "I work in a small library with peeling wallpaper. The biggest decision I made this week was which puppet to use for Friday's story time. Dragon or bunny?" "Damian," asked with a smile. "Dragon. The bunny's missing an ear." He laughed and Sierra found herself relaxing. "Tell me about your library," Damian said, leaning forward with what seemed like genuine interest. Before she knew it, Sierra was telling him about her work, about Tommy, who came every week even though he was too old for story time because his home life was chaotic, about Mrs. Peterson, who volunteered to repair damaged books with careful arthritic hands, about the fundraising campaign to replace the ancient carpet in the children's section. Damian listened attentively, asking questions that showed he was truly engaged. When he finally spoke about his own work, it wasn't about stock prices or business deals, but about why he'd started EduTech in the first place. "My nephew has dyslexia," he explained. "Watching him struggle in school, feeling like he wasn't smart enough because traditional teaching methods didn't work for him, it broke my heart. I wanted to create tools that could reach kids like him." "That's amazing," Sierra said, genuinely impressed. "So you built a billion-dollar company just to help your nephew?" "Well, I didn't plan on the billion-dollar part," Damian said with a self-deprecating smile. "But yes, it started with trying to help one child. The money came later, and honestly, it complicates things more than it helps sometimes." "Hard to believe money complicates things," Sierra said skeptically. "You'd be surprised. Everyone wants a piece of you. For investments, charities, endorsements, it's hard to know who's being genuine and who just sees a dollar sign when they look at you." The vulnerability in his voice struck Sierra. This wasn't a man bragging about his wealth. This was someone admitting to a loneliness she hadn't expected. "Is that why you're so private? The articles I read said you rarely do interviews or attend events." "Partly," Damian nodded. "I'm not interested in being a celebrity. I want my work to speak for itself." "And yet here you are having coffee with a random woman from an airplane," Sierra teased. "Not random," Damian corrected her gently. "The woman who gave me the most peaceful 90 minutes I've had in years." Sierra blushed and changed the subject. "So what brings you to Boston? Business?" "I live here, actually. I was in Chicago for a conference." "You live in Boston?" Sierra was surprised. "I assumed you'd be in New York or Silicon Valley." "I grew up in Boston. My parents still live in the house where I was raised, small place in Dorchester. I have an apartment downtown now, but this will always be home." Their conversation flowed easily after that, jumping from books they'd read to places they'd traveled, favorite childhood memories to dreams still unfulfilled. Sierra was surprised to find out that despite his wealth, Damian had simple tastes. He hated formal galas, preferred takeout to fancy restaurants, and still drove the same car he'd owned before making his fortune. 2 hours passed before Sierra realized it. "I should probably get going," she said reluctantly, checking her watch. "I have dinner with my friend Julie tonight. She'll kill me if I cancel on her again." "Of course," Damian said, though he looked disappointed. "May I walk you to your car?" Outside, the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the street. Sierra hesitated before admitting, "I actually took the bus. My car's in the shop." "Let me drive you home," Damian offered. "That's not necessary." "Please, it would be my pleasure." Sierra expected him to call a driver or lead her to some flashy sports car. Instead, he walked her to a modest sedan parked down the block. Noticing her surprise, he smiled. "Disappointed?" Were you expecting something fancier? Maybe a little, Sierra admitted with a laugh. Though I'm relieved you're not one of those guys with a car worth more than my annual salary. I have one of those too, Damian confessed. But it stays in the garage most of the time. This is more practical for city driving. As they drove to her apartment, Sierra felt a strange mix of comfort and nervousness. Here she was with a man she barely knew, who happened to be wealthy beyond imagination, yet she felt more at ease with him than she had with anyone in a long time. When they arrived at her building, a modest brownstone in Somerville, Damian parked and came around to open her door. "Thank you for today," he said. "I'd really like to see you again, Sierra. Maybe dinner this weekend?" Sierra hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but another part was cautious. "Damian, you're very nice and I've enjoyed talking with you, but I have to ask, what exactly are you looking for here? Because if this is just some novelty for you, some regular person experience—" "It's not," he interrupted firmly. "I don't play games, Sierra. I'm too old and too busy for that." He stepped closer, his voice softening. "I felt a connection with you on that plane. It sounds crazy, I know, but it was there. All I'm asking is a chance to see if there's something real here." The sincerity in his eyes made Sierra's resistance melt. "Okay, dinner this weekend sounds nice." Damian's smile lit up his face. "Saturday at 7? I know a great little Italian place." "Nothing too fancy," Sierra warned. "I don't exactly have a closet full of designer dresses." "Wear whatever makes you comfortable," Damian assured her. "I care more about the company than the clothes." After exchanging phone numbers, Damian insisted she take his private line, not the business number on his card. They said goodbye. Sierra watched him drive away, still not quite believing the turn her life had taken. Inside her apartment, Sierra immediately called her best friend Julie. "You're going to be late for dinner, aren't you?" Julie asked when she answered. "No, I'll be there, but Julie, you won't believe what happened." Sierra proceeded to tell her friend everything, from falling asleep on Damian's shoulder to their coffee date and plans for dinner. Wait, Julie interrupted. "Damian Wolf? The Damian Wolf? The guy who revolutionized educational technology, the billionaire." "Yes, that one," Sierra confirmed, hearing the skepticism in her friend's voice. "Sierra, honey, I love you, but are you sure this isn't some kind of joke? Or worse, some creep pretending to be Damian Wolf?" "It's really him, Julie. I saw his driver's license when he paid for coffee. Plus, he looks exactly like the photos online. And this billionaire tech genius is interested in you because you fell asleep on his shoulder?" Sierra frowned. "Thanks for the vote of confidence." "I didn't mean it like that," Julie backpedaled. "You're amazing. Any man would be lucky to date you. I'm just saying it sounds unlikely. These uber-rich guys usually date models or socialites." "Maybe he's tired of models and socialites," Sierra suggested, though Julie's words planted a seed of doubt. "Anyway, it's just dinner. It probably won't go anywhere." But over the next few days, Damian proved Sierra's prediction wrong. He called her daily just to chat about her day. He sent a beautiful bouquet of wildflowers to the library with a note that said, "Looking forward to Saturday." When Sierra mentioned during one call that she was craving chocolate, a box of gourmet truffles appeared at her door the next morning. Each gesture was thoughtful, but not extravagant, as if he understood her discomfort with displays of wealth. By the time Saturday arrived, Sierra was genuinely excited about their date. She chose a simple black dress, her go-to for the few special occasions in her life, and spent extra time on her hair and makeup. Damian arrived exactly at 7, looking handsome in dark pants and a sport coat with no tie. He brought her a single sunflower, her favorite, though she couldn't remember telling him that. "You look beautiful," he said, his admiration evident in his eyes. "Thank you," Sierra replied, feeling a flush of pleasure at his words. "You clean up pretty well yourself." The Italian restaurant was exactly as Damian had described, small, family-owned, with warm lighting and delicious aromas filling the air. The owner greeted Damian by name and led them to a quiet table in the corner. "You come here often?" Sierra asked after they ordered. "Once a week, usually. Mario's father gave me my first job when I was 16, washing dishes." Damian smiled at the memory. "When I made my first million, I offered to invest in the restaurant, but Mario refused. He said he'd accept nothing. More than me continuing to eat here regularly and overtip his waitstaff. Sierra laughed. I like Mario already. Dinner was wonderful, the food was exceptional, the conversation easy, and Sierra found herself relaxing completely in Damian's company. He told her about growing up as the son of a janitor and a nurse, about working 3 jobs to put himself through college, about the failures that came before his success. People see the end result, he said, but they don't see the years of ramen noodles and sleeping on friends' couches. They don't see all the times I almost gave up. What kept you going? Sierra asked. Damian thought for a moment. My dad, mostly. He worked harder than anyone I've ever known, never complained. Before he retired, he was head custodian at the elementary school for 30 years. Kids would come back to visit him even after they graduated. Not the principal, not their teachers. My dad, the janitor who knew all their names and always had a kind word. The pride in Damian's voice when he spoke of his father touched Sierra deeply. This wasn't a man who had forgotten where he came from. After dinner, they walked along the Charles River, the city lights reflecting on the water. Sierra shivered in the cool evening air, and Damian immediately offered his jacket. As he draped it over her shoulders, his hands lingered, and Sierra felt a spark of electricity between them. Tell me about your family, Damian asked as they continued walking. Sierra's expression grew somber. Not much to tell. My mom left when I was 5. I barely remember her. My dad raised me on his own. He was an English professor at a community college. He's the one who gave me my love of books. She smiled sadly. He died 3 years ago, cancer. Damian squeezed her hand gently. I'm sorry. He was my best friend, Sierra admitted. After he died, I kind of retreated. Work, home, repeat. Julie's always trying to drag me out, get me dating again. But it never felt right. She looked up at Damian. Until now, maybe. The vulnerability in her admission hung in the air between them. Damian stopped walking and turned to face her. I haven't been in a serious relationship in over 5 years, he confessed. My last girlfriend made it clear she was more interested in my bank account than in me. After that, I decided it was easier to be alone than to always wonder about people's motives. And now? Sierra asked softly. Damian reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. Now I'm standing here with a woman who fell asleep on my shoulder before she knew my name or my net worth. A woman who gets excited about dragon puppets and talks about books like they're treasures. And I'm thinking that maybe being alone isn't the better option after all. Sierra's heart raced as Damian leaned closer. When his lips met hers, the kiss was soft, questioning. Sierra responded, her arms sliding around his neck as the kiss deepened. It was sweet and perfect, and over too soon. When they parted, Damian kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. I've wanted to do that since I saw you in the cafe, he admitted. I'm glad you waited until after dinner, Sierra teased. Much more romantic than the coffee shop. Damian laughed and took her hand as they continued their walk. For the rest of the evening, there was a new ease between them, a sense of possibility that hadn't been there before. When Damian finally drove Sierra home, he walked her to her door. Can I see you tomorrow? He asked, clearly reluctant for the night to end. I'd like that, Sierra replied. Their goodbye kiss lingered, full of promise. As Sierra watched Damian drive away, she felt like she was living in a dream. A wonderful, unexpected dream that had started with her falling asleep in seat 14A. But little did Sierra know their budding romance was about to face its first real test. Because while she was falling asleep that night, replaying their kisses in her mind, across town a very different conversation was taking place. In a sleek downtown office, Damian's business partner, Victor Reed, poured himself a whiskey and looked at the photos on his desk. Surveillance photos of Damian and Sierra at the cafe, walking by the river, kissing under the streetlight. Victor picked up his phone and dialed. It's me. You were right. He's seeing someone. Some librarian from Somerville. Find out everything you can about her. If Wolf's finally showing interest in a woman, we need to know why. This could be useful. Victor hung up and studied Sierra's image. "Who are you really, Sierra Lane, and what do you want from Damian Wolfe?" The question lingered in the dark. Office. A shadow cast over the blossoming romance that had begun with a chance meeting in the sky. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Sierra's life. She and Damian fell into an easy rhythm, seeing each other several times a week. They kept things simple: home-cooked dinners at her apartment, walks through the public garden, quiet evenings at his place watching old movies. Damian's penthouse downtown was elegant, but surprisingly comfortable. The first time he brought her there, Sierra had expected cold modern luxury. Instead, she found warm colors, overflowing bookshelves, and a spectacular view of the city. It was impressive without being intimidating. "I expected more glass and chrome," Sierra admitted as Damian gave her the tour. "Maybe a robot butler." "Sorry to disappoint," Damian laughed. "The robot butler's on back order." One wall of his living room was covered with framed children's drawings, colorful, misshapen houses, and stick figures with enormous smiles. "My nephew Jason's artwork," Damian explained, noticing her interest. "He's 14 now, but I've saved everything he's ever drawn for me." Sierra traced the edge of one frame, touched by this glimpse into Damian's heart. "You really adore him, don't you?" "He's the closest thing I have to a son," Damian said softly. "My sister Maggie and her husband work full-time, so I've always been very involved in his life. Jason's the reason I started EduTech. I'd like to meet him someday," Sierra said without thinking, then blushed. "I mean, if that would be appropriate. I don't want to assume." Damian took her hand. "I'd love for you to meet Jason, and Maggie and Dan. They're having a barbecue next weekend. Would you come with me?" The invitation to meet his family felt significant, and Sierra found herself nodding. "I'd like that." As Sierra grew closer to Damian, she began to see the stark contrast between the man and his public image. In person, he was warm, attentive, and surprisingly normal. He made her breakfast after she stayed over for the first time, slightly burned pancakes that they both laughed about. He kept a drawer full of candy bars in his kitchen because he had a sweet tooth he couldn't shake. He always remembered to ask about Tommy and the other children at her library. But Sierra was still adjusting to dating someone with Damian's wealth and status. The first time his driver, Carlos, picked her up in a luxury car, she felt self-conscious stepping out at her apartment building. When Damian mentioned flying to New York for a meeting just for the afternoon, as casually as Sierra might mention going to the grocery store, the difference in their worlds became apparent. Still, Damian seemed determined to bridge that gap. He never flaunted his wealth or made Sierra feel less than. If anything, he seemed to prefer her simpler lifestyle to the high society events he occasionally had to attend. "These galas are all the same," he complained one evening as he adjusted his bow tie in Sierra's bathroom mirror. "Rubber chicken, uncomfortable small talk, and everyone trying to get me to invest in something." "Poor baby," Sierra teased, straightening his tie. "Having to eat fancy food and rub elbows with the elite." "You could come with me, you know," Damian suggested, not for the first time. "Make it bearable." Sierra shook her head. "Not my scene. Besides, I have nothing to wear to something like that." "I could—" "Don't say it," Sierra warned, cutting him off. "Don't offer to buy me a dress or jewelry or whatever else you're thinking." "That's not us, Damian." He sighed but nodded, respecting her boundaries as always. It was one of the things Sierra loved most about him, his willingness to meet her where she was, never pushing or trying to change her. The barbecue at Maggie's house in the suburbs the following weekend was exactly what Sierra needed, to feel more secure in their relationship. Damian's sister welcomed her with a warm hug. "Finally," Maggie exclaimed. "He's been talking about you. Non-stop, but we were starting to think he made you up." "Maggie," Damian groaned. But the affection between the siblings was evident. Jason, Damian's nephew, was initially shy, but warmed up when Sierra mentioned the new graphic novel section she was developing at the library. By the end of the afternoon, he was excitedly showing her his comic book collection. "Uncle D says you fell asleep on him on an airplane," Jason said bluntly, as they flipped through a rare edition he'd saved up for. "That's weird," Sierra laughed. "It was weird and embarrassing, but I'm glad it happened." "Me too," Jason said, with surprising sincerity. "Uncle D smiles more now." Sierra glanced across the yard where Damian was helping his brother-in-law at the grill. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up and smiled, that special smile she'd come to recognize as being just for her. Later, as Damian drove them back to the city, Sierra felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. "Your family is wonderful," she told him, "especially Jason. He's a great kid." "They loved you," Damian replied, reaching for her hand. "Jason doesn't warm up to people easily. You made quite an impression." "It felt normal," Sierra said, trying to articulate what had meant so much to her. "Being there with you, with your family. It didn't feel like I was with Damian Wolf, tech billionaire. It was just us." Damian squeezed her hand. "That's all I want, Sierra. Just us. No labels, no expectations. I'm falling in love with you, you know." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Sierra's heart raced. It had only been 6 weeks since that fateful plane ride, but she couldn't deny her feelings either. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted softly. That night in Damian's bed, with the city lights twinkling beyond the windows, their relationship deepened. There was a new tenderness between them, a shared understanding that what they had found was rare and worth protecting. But across town, in that same sleek office, Victor Reed was building a case against Sierra Lane. "She's clean," he told the private investigator on the phone. "Too clean, if you ask me. No debt except student loans, no criminal record, just a boring life working at that library. But everyone has secrets. Keep digging." "What exactly are you looking for?" the investigator asked. "Anything I can use," Victor replied coldly. "Damian's never invited a woman to meet his family before. This is serious, and a serious relationship. Means she'll have influence. I can't have some nobody librarian affecting our business decisions." The truth was, Victor had plans for EduTech that he knew Damian would never approve. Lucrative contracts with companies that didn't share Damian's ethical standards, data mining of student information that walked a fine legal line. For years, Victor had managed to push these initiatives through by manipulating financial reports and keeping Damian focused on product development rather than business operations. But lately, Damian had been asking more questions, paying closer attention. To the details Victor preferred he ignore, and Victor suspected Sierra's influence. "Find something," Victor ordered the investigator. "Everyone has a weakness." Meanwhile, blissfully unaware of the threat building against her, Sierra was experiencing the first public challenges of dating. Someone famous. A week after the barbecue, a customer at the library approached her desk with a tabloid magazine. "Is this you?" the woman asked, pointing to a grainy photo. Sierra's stomach dropped as she saw herself and Damian leaving a restaurant, his arm around her waist. The headline read, "Tech Titan's New Love, Who is the Mystery Woman?" "I don't discuss my personal life at work," Sierra said firmly, though her hands trembled as she returned the magazine. By lunchtime, several of her co-workers had seen the article. Most were supportive, but Sierra could sense the curiosity, the whispers that followed her through the stacks. When she checked her phone, she had 3 missed calls from her friend Julie and a text from Damian. "Have you seen it? I'm so sorry. Call me when you can." That evening, Damian came to her apartment, his face tight with concern. "I should have warned you this might happen," he said, pacing her small living room. "The press usually leaves me alone because I'm boring news, but a new relationship, that's different." "It's okay," Sierra assured him, though she felt unsettled. "It was bound to happen eventually." "No, it's not okay," Damian insisted. "You didn't sign up for this. I've dealt with public scrutiny for years, but you shouldn't have to." "Damian," Sierra said gently, taking his hand and pulling him down beside her on the couch. "I knew who you were when I called that number. I knew there would be uncomplications, but you're worth it." He cupped her face, his eyes serious. "I'll talk to my PR team. They can help manage this, keep the press at a distance." Sierra nodded, grateful for his concern. But over the next few weeks, the media attention only increased. More photos appeared. Sierra leaving her apartment, Sierra and Damian at the movies, Sierra at the library. Someone had leaked her name to the press, and now reporters occasionally waited outside the library, hoping for a comment or a better photo. The children noticed, of course. During story time, Tommy asked loudly, "Miss Lane, are you famous now? My mum says you're dating a famous rich guy." Sierra managed to redirect the conversation, but the incident bothered her. She loved her quiet life, the sanctuary of her library, the simplicity of her routines. Now she felt watched, exposed. Even Julie, who had initially been skeptical of Damian's interest, was now constantly asking for details about their relationship. "What's it like dating a billionaire?" she pressed over brunch. "Does he buy you crazy expensive gifts, take you to exotic places?" "It's like dating anyone else," Sierra insisted. "We watch movies, we cook dinner. He's just a normal guy." Julie rolled her eyes. "A normal guy who could buy this entire restaurant without blinking. Come on, there must be some perks." Sierra changed the subject, but Julie's questions lingered in her mind. What if people only saw her as an extension of Damian now? What if her identity, her work, everything she'd built on her own was overshadowed by being Damian Wolf's girlfriend? These worries were still fresh when Sierra arrived at Damian's penthouse for dinner one evening to find him agitated, pacing, just as he had in her apartment weeks earlier. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately concerned. "Victor," Damian said tersely. "He's making trouble." Victor Reed had been a somewhat mysterious figure in their relationship. Damian mentioned him occasionally as his CFO and business partner, but they had never met. Sierra knew only that Victor had been with EduTech since the early days and handled much of the business side, while Damian focused on product development. "What kind of trouble?" Sierra asked, following Damian into the kitchen where he was opening a bottle of wine with more force than necessary. "He's suggesting a new partnership with DataTrack," Damian explained, pouring 2 glasses. "They're a company that collects and sells user data, exactly the kind of practice I've always refused to engage in. We have information on millions of students using our programs. I won't sell their privacy." Sierra accepted the glass he offered. "Can he make this deal without your approval?" "No, but he's been presenting it to board members individually, trying to build support." Damian ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "And today he had the nerve to suggest that I've been distracted lately, that my personal life might be affecting my business judgment." "Me," Sierra said quietly. "He meant me." Damian set down his glass and took her hands. "Victor's always been ambitious and we've had our disagreements, but this feels different, more personal." "Have I been distracting you?" Sierra asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in her mind. "You've been centering me," Damian corrected her firmly. "Reminding me what's important. The company was never about making money for me, it was about helping kids like Jason. Victor seems to have forgotten that." They tried to salvage the evening, but a shadow had been cast. That night, as they lay in bed, Sierra traced the worry lines on Damian's forehead. "Maybe we should take a step back," she suggested hesitantly. "Just until you resolve things with Victor and the board." Damian sat up, alarmed. "Is that what you want?" "No," Sierra admitted, "but I don't want to be the reason your company moves in a direction you don't believe in. Your work is too important." "You're important," Damian insisted, pulling her close. "More important than any business deal. I've been alone for years, Sierra. I'm not going back to that, especially not because Victor Reed has some misguided concerns." Sierra rested her head on his chest, comforted by his certainty, even as her own doubts lingered. The next morning, they woke to more troubling news. Overnight, someone had leaked documents to the press suggesting that EduTech was considering the controversial partnership with DataTrack. The technology blogs were already picking up the story, questioning Damian's commitment to student privacy. "This is Victor," Damian said grimly, scanning the articles on his tablet. "He's trying to force my hand by making it public." Sierra watched as Damian made call after call, trying to contain the damage. His face grew more strained with each conversation. Finally, he looked up at her apologetically. "I need to go to the office. Emergency board meeting." "Of course," Sierra said. "Do what you need to do." After Damian left, Sierra tried to go about her day normally, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted. She went to work, read to the children, helped patrons find books, all while wondering if her relationship was causing real damage to Damian's life's work. That evening, the doorbell rang at her apartment. Sierra opened it to find not Damian, but a tall, impeccably dressed man with silver hair and cold eyes. "Miss Lane?" he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Victor Reed, I believe we should talk." Sierra hesitated, then stepped back to let him in. She'd known this confrontation was coming sooner or later. Victor surveyed her small apartment with barely concealed disdain. "Charming place, very modest." "What can I do for you, Mr. Reed?" Sierra asked directly, refusing to be intimidated. "So in her own home, you can stop distracting Damian from what matters," Victor said bluntly. "He's built something extraordinary, something that's changing education for millions of children. Are you really willing to jeopardize that?" Sierra crossed her arms. "I think Damian is perfectly capable of balancing his personal and professional lives." "Is he?" Victor raised an eyebrow. "Since meeting you, he's missed meetings, questioned established business strategies, and rejected a partnership that could increase company revenue by 30%. A partnership that violates everything he built the company to stand for," Sierra countered. Victor's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand business, Ms. Lane. Companies evolve, they grow, they adapt, or they die." "And you don't understand Damian," Sierra shot back. "He didn't create EduTech just to make money. He has principles. Principles don't pay shareholders," Victor said coldly. "Look, I'm not here to argue. I'm here to make you an offer." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded check. $1 million tax-free. In exchange, you walk away, no contact with Damian, no explanation, you just disappear from his life. Sierra stared at the check, speechless with shock and anger. "You're not the first woman to take an interest in Damian's wealth," Victor continued. "But you're the first to get this close. I'm willing to pay a premium to protect what we've built." Sierra snatched the check from his hand and tore it in half, then in quarters. "Get out," she said, her voice shaking. "Get out of my apartment right now." Victor looked genuinely surprised, then thoughtful. "Interesting, maybe I've misjudged you." He retrieved the torn pieces of the check. "But my offer stands. Think about it. $1 million is a lot of money for a librarian. Not enough to sell out someone I love," Sierra said firmly. "Please leave." After Victor left, Sierra sank onto her couch, trembling with anger and hurt. Should she call Damian, tell him what his business partner had done, or would that only create more problems between them? Before she could decide, her phone rang, Damian's ringtone. "Sierra," he said when she answered, his voice tired but relieved. "The board meeting just ended. We shut down Victor's proposal completely. The partnership with DataTrack is dead." "That's wonderful," Sierra said, trying to sound normal despite her racing thoughts. "There's more," Damian continued. "I've asked for a full audit of all our business dealings for the past year. Victor's not happy about it, but the board agreed it's necessary after today's leak." Sierra closed her eyes. Should she tell him about Victor's visit? About the check? Or would that just add fuel to an already volatile situation? "Sierra." "Are you there?" Damian asked. "Yes, I'm here," she said. "That all sounds like good news." "It is, and I want to celebrate." "With you?" There was a pause, then Damian continued, his voice softer. "Sierra, I know the past few weeks have been challenging. The media attention, the pressure from work, Victor's attitude. It's a lot, and it's not what you signed up for when you called that number on the napkin." "Damian, let me finish," he said gently. "What I'm trying to say is, it's all worth it, every complication, every challenge. It's all worth it to be with you. I don't want to just date anymore, Sierra. I want more. I want a future." Sierra's breath caught. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? "Can I come over?" Damian asked. "There's something important I want to ask you. In person." Sierra glanced at the spot where Victor had stood, the memory of his contemptuous offer still fresh. If she told Damian now, would it ruin what should be a beautiful moment? Would it drive an irreparable wedge between business partners? Or would keeping Victor's visit a secret become a dangerous secret in their relationship? "Sierra," Damian prompted when she didn't respond. Sierra took a deep breath, making her decision. "Yes," she said. "Come over. There's something I need to tell you." "Too." As she hung up, Sierra felt both dread and determination. Whatever happened next would change everything. Her relationship with Damian, his relationship with Victor, perhaps even the future of EduTech itself. All because she'd fallen asleep on a stranger's shoulder in seat 14A. Sierra paced her small living room, rehearsing what she would say to Damian. The torn check still lay on her coffee table. evidence of Victor's attempt to buy her off. Part of her wanted to hide it away, to spare Damian the pain of knowing his longtime business partner had so little respect for their relationship. But secrets had a way of festering, of growing into something worse. When the doorbell rang, Sierra took a deep breath and opened the door. Damian stood there with a tired smile and a small bouquet of wildflowers, just like the first ones he'd sent to the library. "Hi," he said simply, and the familiar warmth in his eyes made Sierra's decision clear. Their relationship had to be built on honesty, no matter how difficult. "Come in," she said, taking the flowers. "We need to talk." Damian followed her inside, his expression growing concerned as he noticed her tension. "What's wrong?" Sierra gestured for him to sit on the couch and took a seat beside him. "Victor was here," she said directly. "About an hour ago." Damian's face darkened. "Victor came to your apartment? Why?" Sierra picked up the torn pieces of the check from the coffee table and handed them to Damian. "He offered me this to walk away from you. $1 million to disappear from your life." Damian stared at the torn check in stunned silence, his expression shifting from shock to fury. "He did what?" "He said I was distracting you from what matters, that I'm jeopardizing everything you've built." Sierra watched Damian carefully as she continued. "He seems to think I'm just after your money." Damian set the torn pieces down with controlled precision. When he looked up, his eyes burned with a cold anger Sierra had never seen before. "I'll deal with Victor," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Damian, no," he cut her off, standing abruptly. "This crosses every line. Coming to your home, trying to bribe you, using company money to do it." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Victor's done at EduTech." Sierra stood too, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "I tore up the check," she reminded him. "I told him to leave." Damian's expression softened slightly as he looked at her. "Of course you did, but that doesn't excuse what he tried to do." He pulled her into his arms. "I'm so sorry, Sierra. You don't deserve any of this." Sierra rested her head against his chest, hearing the rapid beating of his heart. "I know Victor's been with you since the beginning. This can't be easy." "It's not," Damian admitted, "but some things are clear-cut. This is one of them." He tilted her chin up to meet his gaze. "No one gets to decide who I love or how I run my company. Not even my oldest friend." The word love hung in the air between them, a truth they danced around but never fully declared. Sierra felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you," she said softly. "I need you to know that it's you I care about, not your money or your status. If you lost it all tomorrow, I'd still be here." Damian brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I know that. It's one of the many reasons I love you too." He took a deep breath. "Which brings me to why I wanted to see you tonight." Sierra's heart raced as Damian took her hands in his. This was what he'd hinted at on the phone, something important he wanted to ask her. "I had it all planned out," Damian said with a rueful smile. "Dinner at that little Italian place where we had our first real date, a walk by the river, the perfect moment." He shook his head. "But maybe this is better, more real, just us being honest with each other." Sierra held her breath as Damian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Sierra Lane," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "When you fell asleep on my shoulder that day on the plane, it was the most peaceful 90 minutes I'd had in years. Since then, you've brought that same peace into my life every day. You see me for who I really am, not what I own or what I've built." He took a shaky breath. "Will you marry me?" Sierra stared at the ring, at Damian's hopeful face, at the future opening before her. It had only been 3 months since that fateful flight, but she knew with absolute certainty that this was right. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Damian, I'll marry you." Joy bloomed across his face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, not too flashy, but still beautiful. Just like their relationship, Damian pulled her close, sealing their engagement with a kiss that promised forever. For a moment, Victor and his schemes, the media attention, the differences in their worlds, all of it fell away, leaving only the two of them and the love they'd found. But reality couldn't be held at bay for long. Damian's phone rang, his assistant calling about the emergency board meeting he'd requested. As he spoke briefly on the phone, arranging the details, Sierra studied her ring and wondered what came next. How would their lives change? How would her simple existence as a children's librarian fit with being the wife of Damian Wolf? When Damian hung up, he must have read the questions in her eyes. "We'll figure it all out," he promised. "Together." Sierra nodded, trusting him, trusting them. Together. The following morning, Sierra went to work as usual, though the weight of the ring on her finger and the knowledge of what Damian was doing at that very moment, confronting Victor before the board, made it hard to focus. She hadn't told anyone about the engagement yet, not even Julie. It felt too new, too precious to share, but secrets were hard to keep in a small community like the library. Mrs. Peterson noticed the ring immediately when Sierra handed her a stack of books to repair. "Is that what I think it is?" the older woman asked, her eyes twinkling behind her glasses. Sierra blushed. "Yes, it happened last night." Mrs. Peterson squeezed her hand. "He's a lucky man, dear, and about time you found someone worthy of you." Word spread quickly among the staff. Most offered warm congratulations, though Sierra noticed a few whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. She tried not to let it bother her. People would always talk, always wonder what Damian Wolf saw in an ordinary librarian. By lunchtime, Sierra still hadn't heard from Damian. The board meeting must be running long. She slipped away to the break room to check her phone and found a text from him. "It's done. Victor's out. Can you meet me at my place after work? We have a lot to discuss." The message was brief, businesslike. Sierra frowned, wondering what "a lot to discuss" meant. Was he having second thoughts? Had the confrontation with Victor changed things? The afternoon dragged by, each minute stretching into what felt like hours. When her shift finally ended, Sierra practically ran to catch the bus to Damian's building. Carlos, Damian's driver, was waiting for her in the lobby. "Mr. Wolf asked me to bring you up," he explained with a warm smile. "And congratulations. Fizz Lane, he told me the good news this morning." "Thank you, Carlos," Sierra replied, touched that Damian had shared their engagement with the man who had worked for him for years. When the elevator doors opened to Damian's penthouse, Sierra stepped out cautiously, not sure what to expect. The apartment was dark except for the soft glow of candles leading from the elevator to the living room. Sierra followed the trail of light to find Damian standing by the windows, looking out at the city skyline. He turned when he heard her approach, and the mixture of weariness and love in his eyes made her heart ache. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi yourself," he replied, opening his arms to her. Sierra went to him, feeling the tension in his body as he held her close. "How did it go?" Damian sighed. "As well as could be expected. The board voted unanimously to remove Victor after I presented evidence of his unauthorized negotiations with data track and other irregularities we uncovered during the audit." "How did he take it?" "Not well." Damian pulled back slightly to look at her. "He accused me of throwing away our friendship and the company's future because I was lovesick over a nobody." His words, not mine, he added quickly. Sierra winced. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Victor showed his true colors long before you came into my life. I just didn't want to see it." Damian led her to the couch. "But that's not what I wanted to discuss with you." Sierra sat beside him, suddenly nervous. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about what happens next, for us." Damian took her hands, his fingers brushing over her engagement ring. "I know we haven't talked about a timeline for the wedding or where we'd live after or any of the practicalities. We have time to figure all that out," Sierra assured him. "We do," Damian agreed. "But there's one decision I've already made that affects both of us." He took a deep breath. "I'm stepping down as CEO of EduTech." Sierra stared at him in shock. "What? Why?" "Damian, you love that company. You built it from nothing." "I do love it," Damian confirmed. "And I'm not leaving completely. I'll stay on as chairman of the board and chief innovation officer. But the day-to-day operations, the business side, I'm handing that over to Maggie." "Your sister?" Damian nodded. She has an MBA from Harvard. She's been working in educational administration for 15 years. She understands both the business side and our mission. I've been trying to convince her to join the company for years. But why now? Sierra asked, trying to understand. Is it because of Victor? Because of me? Because of what I want my life to be, Damian said simply. This morning, as I watched the board vote Victor out, I realized something. I've spent 12 years building EduTech, pouring every ounce of energy into making it successful. And I'm proud of what we've accomplished. But I'm ready for a different kind of success now. What kind? Damian's eyes softened as he looked at her. The kind that involves a real life outside of work, a family. Time for the things that matter most. He squeezed her hands. I want to be a husband who's actually present, not constantly distracted by business emergencies. I want us to have a normal life, as normal as possible anyway. Sierra was touched by his words, but still concerned. I never wanted you to give up what you love for me. I'm not giving it up, Damian assured her. Just shifting priorities. I'll still be involved in product development, still working on the innovations that help kids learn. That's always been my favorite part anyway. He smiled. I might even have time to volunteer for story time at a certain library. Sierra laughed, imagining Damian sitting cross-legged on the floor, reading to her group of children. The kids would love that. There's one more thing, Damian said, his tone growing more serious. With all the media attention lately, our privacy is going to be hard to maintain, especially after the news about Victor breaks. Sierra nodded. She'd been bracing herself for increased scrutiny once their engagement became public knowledge. I have a house on the coast about an hour north of the city, Damian continued. It's private, secluded. I was thinking we might want to spend some time there after the wedding. Maybe even make it our primary home eventually if you liked it. What about my job? Sierra asked. The library? There are libraries everywhere. That need good children's librarians, Damian pointed out. Or you could start something new. Your own literacy program, perhaps. Something you've always wanted to do but never had the resources for. The idea was both frightening and exhilarating. Sierra had always dreamed of creating a more extensive outreach program for underprivileged children, bringing books and reading resources to communities that needed them most. I'd have to think about it, she said honestly. The library has been my home for so long. Of course, Damian said. There's no rush to decide anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm committed to finding a balance that works for both of us, whatever that looks like. Sierra leaned in to kiss him, overwhelmed by the depth of his love and consideration. Thank you for understanding how important my work is to me. It's part of who you are, Damian said simply, and I love who you are. They spent the rest of the evening discussing possibilities for their future, a small, private wedding, splitting their time between the city and the coast, ways Sierra could expand her work in children's literacy with Damian's support. With each plan they made, each dream they shared, the path forward became clearer. 2 weeks later, the media frenzy that followed Victor's removal from EduTech and Damian's announcement about stepping back as CEO had finally started to die down. Sierra and Damian had made no public statement about their engagement, preferring to keep that joy private for as long as possible. On a crisp Saturday morning, they drove up to the coastal house Damian had mentioned. Sierra gasped when she first saw it. Not the ostentatious mansion she had half expected, but a beautiful, comfortable-looking home nestled among pine trees with a breathtaking view of the ocean. It's not fully furnished yet, Damian warned as he unlocked the front door. I haven't spent much time here in recent years, but to Sierra it was perfect. Light streamed through large windows, illuminating open spaces that felt welcoming rather than imposing. A wraparound porch offered views of both the sunrise and sunset. The master bedroom had a small reading nook that seemed designed just for her. What do you think? Damian asked as they walked along the private stretch of beach behind the house. Could you see us building a life here? Sierra looked out at the horizon, where the blue of the ocean met the blue of the sky in a seamless line. Yes, she said, feeling the rightness of it in her bones. Yes, I could. Damian wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "There's a small town about 10 minutes away. They have a library. A very small one that could probably use someone with your expertise." Sierra leaned back against him, considering the possibility. A fresh start, a new challenge, a life with the man she loved, balancing privacy and purpose. "We could get a dog," she mused, smiling as Damian chuckled against her hair. "We could get 10 dogs if you want," he promised, "though maybe we should start with one." As they stood there together, watching the waves roll in and out, Sierra thought about the strange, wonderful journey that had brought them to this moment. All because she'd been too tired to keep her eyes open on a flight from Chicago to Boston. All because Damian had been kind enough to let a stranger sleep on his shoulder. "You know what I just realized," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "We've never flown together since we met." Damian smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're right, we should remedy that. But this time," Sierra added with a mock serious expression, "I want the window seat." Damian laughed and pulled her closer. "Deal, though I'm not opposed to you falling asleep on my shoulder again." "I think that can be arranged," Sierra said, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. 6 months later, Sierra and Damian were married in a private ceremony on the beach behind their coastal home. Only family and close friends attended. Maggie and her family, Sierra's friend Julie, a few colleagues from the library, and Damian's parents, who had welcomed Sierra with open arms from the moment they met her. Sierra wore a simple white dress that fluttered in the ocean breeze, and Damian couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him across the sand. Their vows were personal and heartfelt, promising not wealth or status, but honesty, support, and unwavering love. At the small reception afterward, Jason, now 15, made a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Before Uncle D met Sierra, he worked all the time. He was always busy, always stressed. Now he laughs more. He even coached my baseball team this spring. The teenager looked at Sierra with sincere gratitude. "Thanks for making him happy, and for helping me with my English paper. I got an A." Later, as Sierra and Damian danced together under strings of twinkling lights, he whispered in her ear, "Are you happy, Mrs. Wolfe?" Sierra smiled up at her husband, blissfully, and she was. The past 6 months had brought many changes: a new home, a new job as the director of the small-town library, which was already benefiting from her experience and Damian's generous donations, a certain level of public interest in their relationship that they managed carefully, but through it all they had each other. The connection that had begun so unexpectedly on that flight had deepened into a partnership built on trust, respect, and genuine love. The Monday after their wedding, as they prepared to leave for their honeymoon in Italy, a package arrived at the house. Inside was a small silver picture frame containing the torn pieces of Victor's check, reassembled and mounted behind glass. A note accompanied it, a reminder that some things are worth more than money. "Congratulations on your marriage. May your life together be filled with peace, joy, and many comfortable naps. Love, Julie." Sierra laughed as she showed it to Damian, who shook his head in amusement. "Should we hang it?" she asked. "Absolutely," Damian replied, "in my office, to remind me every day of what really matters." As they boarded their flight to Rome that evening, Damian insisted Sierra take the window seat in first class. The flight attendant offered them champagne, which they accepted with knowing smiles. "To seat 14A, Damian proposed, raising his glass, "and the best seatmate a man could ask for." "To fate," Sierra countered, clinking her glass against his. "And to finally being exactly where we're meant to be." As the plane lifted into the clouds, Sierra rested her head on Damian's shoulder. Not from exhaustion this time, but from a simple desire to be close to him. Damian kissed the top of her head and laced his fingers through hers. Their wedding rings glinting in the soft cabin light. Sometimes the most extraordinary journeys began with the simplest moments: a missed connection, a last-minute seat assignment, a tired woman falling asleep against a stranger, and somehow, against all odds, finding home in the most unexpected place. The end.